This is the front desk.
Hello and welcome to episode 42 of the Crackenbacks podcast with your hosts, Dr. Terry Wyman and Dr. Spencer Barron. How you guys doing today?
Good, Lance.
Doing good, Lance.
It's good to hear. So joining us today is Stephen Lambdin. Stephen Lambdin is the current U.S. national strength and conditioning coach for Team USA Taekwondo. He's been involved with the U.S. national Taekwondo team for over 20 years as an athlete, mentor, and coach. Besides being a strength coach and an Olympian, he is an educator, motivational speaker, and helps athletes around the country with clinics and public appearances. How you doing this morning, Stephen?
Good, man. I need to have you follow me around and introduce me. Make me feel good about myself.
Well, the one thing he did...
I can always use more pay.
yeah, for sure.
And the one thing he kind of glossed over, you are an Olympian. So that's like every athlete's goal. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it could be worse. I always tell people, I think especially these days, people will ask like, oh, was it as cool as it seems? And like, it's sad because it's almost like people want me to say like, nah, it's overrated. It's not everything you think, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, I'm always the first person to say like, oh man, if you think it's cool on TV, it's like way cooler behind the scenes. There's so much stuff going on. And it's one of those, I'm always kind of surprised because people are surprised when I'm like, no, it's everything it's cracked up to be, for sure.
It is. And and I agree with you. Being going to Olympics, I agree with you. And I think sometimes the stuff you see behind the scenes is way better than the stuff you see on the camera.
Sure. Yeah, and it's funny because like that's just the way it is these days. But like, Beijing, it was, oh my God, the pollution's terrible. London, the traffic. Rio, Zika. Now coronavirus, and it's like. But you go and talk to those athletes and they'll be like, yeah, not only did I not think about it, I had the greatest time of my life. And so it's just, being negative sells these days, unfortunately.
That's the news for you.
Yeah.
So, Stephen, I got to tell you, when Terry was talking about you before you got on, he was mentioning how you have a certification in strength and conditioning. And then the next thing he said was, and he's a powerful man. So I'm imagining this guy that would take up the full screen on our
have him take his shirt off, and he will.
But I think he meant powerful in the way of what you do as a voice for the athlete.
Well,
is that a distinction? Is that a clear distinction?
Again, you guys are. I don't want my wife to listen to this because she's going to be like, man, these guys, they're way too nice to you. But no, that's a really, really amazing compliment, and I'll definitely take it. I've always considered myself to be the Aaron Brockovich of Taekwondo. Yeah, that's just to shoehorn in the fact that I totally actually do listen to the podcast, and I did listen to that episode. But if you talk to some of the coaches in Taekwondo, I think the flip side of that coin is they'll tell you that I've always had a problem with keeping my mouth shut. And,
That's why I like you.
Yeah. I take it as a compliment as well because, and I'll give all the credit where credit's due to, my parents and my faith. It's like, if I don't think something's right, or I think there's some sort of injustice going on, particularly with something that I can control in the sport, I almost can't not say something. And so, for a lot of my career, I was on the Athlete Advisory Council as a liaison for the athletes and an advocate for the athletes, because as you guys know, dealing with athletes all the time, unless you're the Michael Phelps of your sport and you're getting that kind of exposure, it's not like you can go on ESPN when there's a problem. And most of the time athletes get stuck in these weird situations where it's like, I don't think these selection procedures for the Olympics are fair. Me and my coach don't know what to do because we've never been in this process. Most people don't have the benefit of being a multiple-time Olympian, multiple-time national team member. And so it's like they get one shot at it. And it's like, having had a background in this sport where the most elite of elite coaches have not only told me that I was crap at the sport, but genetically I would never make it. You know, how it started was, if I don't cut weight, I'll never make it as a heavyweight. Like, I got to get out of heavyweight. It doesn't matter what your natural weight is. Like, you need to cut weight, throw a trash bag on, go run outside. Just the worst advice. And then that became, well, if you don't cut weight, you're never going to make a second national team. Oh, you've made 5 national teams? Well, you're never going to make it to the Olympics because you're too heavy. You don't know what you're doing. Oh, you made it to the Olympics? Well, the second you turn 30, it's all going to fall apart anyway. And it's like, you know, like we said at the beginning, people want to be negative because it's this weird reflection on themselves of, if I'm going to be supportive of somebody, oh, you know, it shines the light on the fact that, oh, that one tournament I didn't do something, you know, I didn't compete as hard as I could. And it's like, I've found the people that tend to be the most self-fulfilled in this sport, and I'm sure it's this way in every sport, but the people that tend to be the most self-fulfilled are also the ones that are giving back the most. And so it's like, to bring it back, I know I sidetracked a little bit there, but to bring it back, I'll definitely take that compliment from Doc Terry, because it's, I like to think we think a lot alike in that you have to advocate for the people that don't have a voice.
So do you remember your first challenge in that kind of political environment in sports that made you go, okay, this is bullshit. I need to fight this, or I need to find out what to do?
Maybe not the first one, but an early one. I made my first senior national team the day after I turned 18. So I'm tied for being the youngest person ever to make the national team as a male heavyweight, and went to Pan Am Championships in Argentina. Somehow, at the time, I considered it a performance of a lifetime, but in retrospect to the career, it was an average performance, unfortunately. But like, in my semifinal, knocked out the South American Games champion in the second round, lost on a deduction in finals to take silver at 18 at the Pan American Championships. And after that, the 2 years go by. So we're getting ready for the next Pan Am Championships. And instead of having a team trials, they decide that they're going to have a selection camp. So they're going to bring us all to Colorado Springs. They're going to make you work out for a week, and then they're going to pick who's going to Pan Ams, which I don't know how that would be better than letting people fight off for it. Like, how, you know, how's that going to be a good gauge? And one of the coaches that was running the selection camp literally picked his own, didn't recuse himself from picking in my weight division, but picked his own guy who, this is going to be rude, but it's the truth, was a pretty notorious drunk and partier. Picked his own guy over me, and in the notes that I got back said, oh, you're not ready for the senior international level. And I remember sitting there going like, okay, I'm young, but I literally got silver at the last Pan Am Championships. I'm 2 years stronger. I'm 2 years faster. I'm 2 years better. And now you're telling me I'm less prepared. And so there were other times less monumental, but that's the first time I really got kicked in the teeth by the system and had nobody to turn to, because everybody just kind of went, oh yeah, that's the process, happens. Like, you got to pay your dues. And it's like, maybe my biggest pet peeve in the world is hearing somebody tell a younger athlete, like, well, don't worry, you'll get there. And it's like, first of all, we don't know you're going to get there. Like, your time might be right now, because fortunately, I've been super blessed with a massive career, like super long career, but it's like, I'm very aware that I'm blessed in that most people don't get that. And so it's like, that probably was a defining moment in my career for, excuse my language, but fuck these guys. Like, and I definitely always try to taper the language.
I love that attitude.
Anything short of that expression in my mind, whenever it comes to those kind of things, doesn't do justice to the people that need help. Like, it has to be that angry about it.
And I think I've seen that side of you just a few times.
Handful. Mostly in competition, but
yeah. I know when to keep quiet, when to let you brood, and when to let you keep quiet, when to party with you.
Yeah, exactly.
So you're also trained in verbal martial arts, too, right? Is that
my mom was a lead contract negotiator for GE Transportation for about 25 years, and so she was working with the railroads, which aren't typically the most kind towards women. And so, yeah, being argumentative and fighting for a cause definitely runs in the family.
And your wife is such a meek and mild woman as well.
Oh man, my wife is a charge nurse in a heart cath lab, and it's funny. The story that I always like to tell is that she's the sweetest person in the universe.
Oh, yeah.
And one night she was working a night shift, and I had to go up to. I was taking her food or something like that, and I walk in, and from outside the door to the front door to the hospital, I hear somebody's just getting ripped a new one. And I'm like, oh man, I hate to be that guy. And as I get closer, I realize, like, wait a minute, that's my wife ripping into somebody. And I get behind her, and she's just, don't you ever do that in just ripping into this kid. The kid like walks off, and he's like crying. And my wife turns around, oh, hey babe, totally fine. And afterwards, like I find out from her that, he basically ruined a sterile field during a procedure. Totally justifiable. But I've talked to a few of her coworkers, and they're like, yeah, she's different at work. Like, all right, noted. So I married well, basically.
We all did.
Since you brought her up multiple times already, and it's only been 10 minutes into our program, maybe we should interview her.
Yeah, for sure. She'd be better than me. Yeah.
But in actuality, what if she was to describe you? What would it be? What would that sound like?
I guess how I would hope she would describe me. I try to. She'd definitely say that when I believe I'm right about something, I'm definitely passionate. Even when I'm arguing with her, so therefore I'm inherently wrong.
I was wondering.
But I also think that a lot of times how passionate I can be about the causes that I believe in can, frankly, overshadow the fact that I try to be really kind to people, because I understand that most people are going through things that, I mean, I can't remember where I've heard it. I've heard it a couple of times lately, but it's like the worst thing to happen to somebody is still the worst thing to ever happen to them. And so whether it's like, I didn't get into that one college I'm trying to go to, might be the worst thing that's ever happened to that person. Just because I've had something worse happen doesn't take away from their feelings. And so it's like, I would hope that aside from being passionate, my wife would describe me as kind.
Yeah, I think she would.
Oh, you.
Do you remember or can recall a particular time that you were an advocate for an athlete or an organization, and you went at it like you were on fire, but then when you heard the other side, the other side of the story, do you remember a time where you went oop and then went back to your organization or your person?
Yeah.
Explain.
So part of, there are sub councils for the Athlete Advisory Council. And so, we take turns on Judiciary Committee, Ethics Committee, stuff like that. And don't get me wrong, I'm grateful for my time as being an athlete representative, but probably the worst year in that process was when I was on the Ethics Committee. And because, first of all, out of all of them, only 10% were cut and dry. This person said this, I have it in writing, they need to be punished. Like, it just never broke out that way. The arguments were always one of two things, like he said, she said, which I never really felt like it was our jurisdiction, but hey, it is what it is. And then the much worse flip side of that coin was this person did something absolutely terrible, while not illegal, absolutely terrible. And it's, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. It's like, you'll listen to the first person talk and be like, man, this person's the devil. And then 2 seconds later, when that person starts talking, they go, no, that's not what happened. And they start talking about it. And so a lot of restless nights thinking about ethics calls and obviously bound by confidentiality, but there's still a couple of them that keep me up at night just on the grounds of like, man, I can't believe so-and-so did that to that person. And it's like, yeah, definitely always two sides to the story, and having to wade through the sea of crap that people make up to try and figure out what's actually going on. But it's being on the athlete advisory council for the previous 8 years leading up to 2020 probably aged me an extra decade. I'm actually only 16. I just look like I'm 45.
I thought
Steven,
you were
do
18.
realize-
Sorry.
Yeah.
Do you notice or realize now that with the advent of safesports.org, that things are a little more cut and dry or more clear, or is it there's still a lot of subject to subjectivity?
Yeah.
I mean, is it a little more?
No, and that's a really good question, because I think Safe Sport catches a lot of flack just because it seems like their response time and turnaround time on cases sucks. It just does, because it'll be like somebody files a complaint, there's an investigation, and then 8 months later there's a result. And it's like, obviously it varies depending on the severity, but for the most part, I think the fact that there are clear-cut rules now about, hey, you have to have a third person there. It can't just be the coach and the athlete doing a training at 10 o'clock at night. Like, it protects both the athletes and the coaches, both from accusations and from bad things happening to athletes. So like, I really love what Safe Sport's doing for sports in the United States. But like I said, even though it's much more clear cut, I think they get a little bit of a bum rap just because I can't believe it took 8 months. I reported this guy for calling me an asshole, 3 weeks ago, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, I can't believe it's taking 8 months. And it's like, yeah, but you have to understand there are degrees of severity for sure, because like the one that I always like to point to is they'll investigate whatever you bring up for sure, for the most part, because I know a guy who had, I guess, been having an affair, and somebody, an affair behind his wife's back, grown adult, nothing to do with the sport. Somebody reported him to Safe Sport, and it was like he wasn't allowed to be at tournaments for 6 months. And it's like, at the end of it, Safe Sport ruled, oh yeah, this isn't our jurisdiction, it's none of our business. And it's like, so what I always try to tell people is there's a lot of nuance that goes on behind the scenes, and it's like they're just trying to be absolutely as thorough as possible, because hey, for a lot of people, like, this is not only their job, but it's their life. Like, they've been involved with the sport their whole life. And so it's like, they want to make sure they get not only as much information and advocate for athletes as best as possible, but they also don't want to overstep their bounds. Cause I mean, that happens from time to time.
Well, actually, Stephen, this might be a fun time to bring up the credibility of Safe Sport, or the action orientation of Safe Sport, because 2.5 years ago, or maybe 3 years ago now, and we have one of our facilities is in a strength and conditioning facility, as the medical part, but not there anymore. But the owner, who was a strength and conditioning coach, worked with and was hired by a lot of the tennis players. This particular female was from Russia, 16 years old, and he was hired by the family to go out and coach and take care of her. He's about 30, in his mid 30s, this guy from Ireland. And he ends up, the mother sees one day that her phone rings, and it comes up as saying boyfriend. She goes, "Oh, you have a boyfriend." And one thing led to the other. Who the boyfriend was, and it was the coach. And so now the most bizarre twist of things, I find out from one of my patients, who is another coach, says, say, it's public knowledge. Safe Sport posted this as the coach is under investigation, and that is considered a pedophile, or I don't think the word pedophile was in there, but you weren't allowed to be around the coach if you were under 18. So now my patients aren't allowed to
Yeah.
come into the facility. Next thing I know, that one of my patients, who is the one of the sergeants for the police department, the local police department, he tells me, he goes, you know, that one of your other patients that I referred you, a cop, is one of the guys on the investigation, because Safe Sport turns it over to him. So this thing, and I'm allowed to ask him, but he's not allowed to tell me.
Right.
So I asked him one day, and he told me just flat out, you need to leave. And I go, you mean move my practice out here? But the point I'm making is, it took so long, and he told me the problem was that the mom was now afraid to press charges because this kid is up and coming, and they don't want her earmarked as someone that has this kind of background, you know, pedophile background, especially since it was the boyfriend.
And you know, that's it's really unfortunate, because the stigma around survivors that get stuck in these terrible situations. It's like, you know, it's all fine and good when somebody fires out that supportive tweet, but it's like, at the end of the day, then when doors get closed and selection procedures are happening, and not even necessarily that those things get brought up, but you have, frankly, dickhead coaches that turn around and go, oh yeah, but that person's difficult. And it's like, what do you mean by difficult? Do you mean they were difficult to a friend of yours, or they're not coachable? Like, these are two very different things. And so it's, you know, it's,
and I think
I've got nothing good to add to that conversation. Let's put it that way.
And I think we've seen, the bigger the name, you can, you know, like we saw in the last Olympics, one of the gymnastic girls, you know, kind of spoke up a little bit.
Yeah.
So if you're a big name, sometimes I think you can wade through the storm. But if you're not a big name yet, you can get lost in that storm.
Yeah, especially if you're still in the junior team pipeline and stuff like that. I totally get it.
And I think that can be a problem. Have you noticed some of the, because I know we alluded to earlier, I know how you love politics, and I know how you love how you know, controversial stuff, and I know how you love all that. I mean, half the time we've done some of our travels, you know, it's been the first half of the travel is bitch session, the other half has been looking for a good bar.
Yeah, for sure.
So have you seen any of that change in the last 2 years, or is it more media hype that the public has seen, but in actuality it hasn't changed much?
So more specific, and I'll keep it specifically to Taekwondo just because more exposure, obviously, to my main sport. The good part is, I think from a USA Taekwondo perspective, we've done a good job of not only leaning into the new avenues with Safe Sport, i.e. we've stopped trying to, for lack of a better way to put it, police and, you know, be our own judge. Now there's an entity that handles this, so it takes a little bit of the pressure off. But more importantly, I think the newer staff, in particular, Coach Gareth and Coach Paul, who were originally from the UK, I wish they had been around with Team USA when I was younger, because of the level of professionalism they bring. And so, like, one of the things that always kind of bugged the hell out of me was when we'd go on team trips, afterwards, all the coaches and staff, Doc Terry excluded, you know, not all the coaches and staff would go out and get blitzed with underage athletes. And it was like, even as a kid, like, not to call out any one specific person, but the first beer I ever had at 18 was bought by one of the national team coaches for me. And it's like, at the time, I still don't like beer. And at the time, like, I was drinking it, and I remember thinking as a kid, like, okay, like, you know, this is going to make me one of the guys. And so it's like, it's a real I get how kids get roped into these situations, because you want to fit in so bad, because you look up to these coaches as the end all be all. They know everything about these sports. And it's like, it wasn't till years later that I was like, oh man, that was really messed up. Like, that's not cool that he was like, here, drink this. Like, that's not cool at all. And
Yeah.
so the good part is in the last couple of years, I think not just with Safe Sport, the newer coaching staff that we have in, uber professional in that,
Yeah.
like, an athlete says, well, I got into an argument with coach on a text message. He goes, I have that thread saved from 2.5 years ago. Here's what was said. And it's like, not only is it professional from the, we're covering all of our bases, but there's been instances of, hey, Steven, we're going to be doing a one-on-one with this person. Can you be there? So that way we meet the Safe Sport requirement of having an additional adult in the room. And so it's like, I think we are in so much better a position than we were a couple of years ago, because we've started hiring the right people with actual ethics, morals, and integrity. So it's definitely self-serving, but things are on the up and up, fortunately.
So, big question, and it oftentimes revolves around my office and ends up being more funny than anything, because they know about intention. Intention is everything. And when a student or an athlete or even one of our young patients, and I think Terry could vouch for me on this, is we're from a generation that it was a lot more easy going about things. And so, stuff that maybe, some of the powers that be might not realize were, well, we can't do this anymore. Name calling, but in jest, it's very, I mean, do you realize that now powers that be have a much more of an awareness about things you can say or can't say or do?
Yeah, I think so. Because what's funny is when I took this strength coach job with Team USA, like, I come from the generation of athletes where, fortunately, not my primary coach throughout most of my career, Jeff, but he's not who I'm referencing with this, but let's put it this way, a different coach when I was 12, so the match doesn't matter. He's 12, who cares? I got hit for losing a match. And so it's like, obviously that's a more extreme end of it, but I definitely came up in the time period where if you were fighting like trash, you'd have a coach say, hey, pull your head out of your ass, get your head in the game, kind of a thing. And in moving out here to Colorado Springs, my wife and I had a real candid conversation where she was like, hey, not that you would, but you have to be real careful in how you give criticism to athletes these days. And she's like, you can't do what was done to you of, hey, get your head in the game. Like, you can't yell at people like that. It has to be constructed in a much more positive way, which, in fairness, I think is a good thing, because I look back at the times where things like when I got smacked for losing a match at 12 happened, or I had a full-on panic attack in semifinals at Pan Am Games in 2011 because I had a coach grab me by the chest guard screaming in my face because I made a mistake in the first round, which then led to a complete collapse of my game against somebody that I should have crushed easily. And so the awareness has definitely gone up, because in the past on a national team when I was younger, getting yelled at was pretty typical, frankly. And, I've always had a pretty thick skin whenever it comes to criticism about my game, because I want to get better. And so, be as brutally honest as you can. And there would be times that I'd go home and be like, man, I'm the worst I'm just pure trash. And now it's thanks to things like Safe Sport and, frankly, social media making things more prevalent and in people's awareness. I've seen some of the newer coaches mad at athletes, but it's a very different ball game now, in that it's, come on, man, we've worked on this, like, you're better than this, like, stay focused. And it's much more constructive as opposed to, frankly, destructive. And so, it's just, if you had told me what it was going to be like when I first made a national team in 2006, if you had told me what it was going to be like now versus then, I would have laughed in your face. I would have been like, there's no way. This is the way it is. It's the culture. And it's like, no, that's a that's a crap excuse for being a bad coach.
It's ironic that you bring up the getting hit after
Right.
A loss or a mistake, but in the 70s I wrestled in high school and did very well. My coach, he was an amazing to this day, but he would, depending on my mood, he could tell, before a match he would take me off to the side, and we had a full auditorium, and would smack me in the face so hard that the only thing I could do is go and kill somebody. And fortunately, that
Right.
was the person that was going to be my opponent. Yeah. But even my parents went, wow, he's really...
Yeah, he's a good coach.
Woo!
Like, no, use your words, big man. Use your words. Like,
but I didn't mind. So, I mean, I would have never pressed charge. But today, people... That would be... Even if the kid didn't mind, there would be somebody going, what the heck just happened?
Yeah, and it's riding a really, really fine line with that too, because it's like, I understand and I appreciate the way things are shaping and the way things are going now, but it's like, even up until the last time I fought this past May, it's like I had my coach, who I've been with for the overwhelming majority of my career, who, I mean, he's like a brother to me. At the end of the day, he ripped into me at one point, and it's like, I'm also of the mind frame, of the background and stuff like that, that at that point we'd been working together long enough. I trust him. I know he's not going to hurt me or anything like that. But at that point in the match, that's what I needed to hear. Like, I was not performing at the level that I know how to perform, and it wasn't for, I just wasn't engaged. And so it's one of those, it's walking that really fine line. Like you said, it got you jacked and ready to go just murder somebody out in the match. And it's like, it's walking that really fine line of, frankly, coaches now have to be, more sports psychologists than anything, because you have to know, okay, does this athlete need that positive reinforcement, or does this athlete need a, hey, gut check, like, let's get locked in and get back after it, kind of a thing. And so it's different.
Are you seeing that balance when before it was like, get your head out of your ass, to here's a participation trophy?
That's exactly what I was going to bring up.
Yeah, it's
are you seeing that balance where you got to motivate them, but you don't want to break them down? Or if some kids need to be broken down to come back stronger, or it's a weeding out process, versus the participation trophy where you get your feelings hurt if somebody looks at you wrong. I've seen it go from the far one side to the far other side. Are you starting to see that balance come back? Because I think you need a little bit of both. But the participation trophy, that fries me.
It's the worst.
That era.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you asked.
Well, it's so at the Team USA, like, Colorado Springs Olympic level of things, like, yeah, the ball game hasn't changed in that regard. Like, there's no participation trophies. We're here to win an Olympics, so to speak.
Right.
And so it's like, as I'm sure it is in the NBA and the NFL, the good part about these athletes is they're all highly motivated, highly talented. And it's like, they're just as motivated, if not twice as motivated, as the coach to get to that medal stand. And so not a change at the elite level, but I work with a lot of clients on the side. And it's like, I had a kid who is really talented, has a lot of potential, lost his opening match. And he's young, like, he's 11. So there's some slack for sure. But it was like, I on a Zoom call with him, he totally busted out the, like, participation medal, and he was just like, oh yeah, I didn't win, but I still got a medal. Check out how cool this medal is. And I was like, oh yeah, man, that is a cool medal. Yeah, don't ever show that to me again. And he's like, what do you mean? And I'm just like, did you go to the tournament to participate, or did you go to the tournament to win? And he was like, oh, well, I wanted to win. And I went, okay. And this is one of the things I like to tell all my kids is, like, it's not all about the medals, but it's somewhat about the medals. Cause, like, I hate the expression, oh, it's about the journey. Cause, like, the one that I always like to say is, oh yeah, that's why we got into World War II, was the journey. No, we got into win, kind of a thing. Like, there are times where you are there to win. And it's like, I just told him, I was like, because I tell all my athletes, hey, I want you to focus on your performance. You can't control the results, right? Like sometimes the judges aren't good, sometimes the ring's slippery, sometimes it's cold out. Like, there's 5 million variables at any one given moment for any one competition. And it's like, concentrate purely on your performance and you'll be satisfied regardless of the results. But we're not going to be satisfied with, while we can be satisfied with our performance, we're never supposed to be satisfied with losing. Because like if we didn't care about winning and losing, we shouldn't be competing. And it's like I kind of went through that with the kid, and he was like, "Yeah, you're right. No." And like his mom told me afterwards, he was like, "Yeah, he threw away that medal. What did you tell him?" And I was like, "Nothing he didn't need to hear."
So I have a 2-part question. One, at the junior level, where they're not that senior level, where they are handing out the participation trophies, the coaches are more of, hey, you paid me your money, you advance type of thing.
Right.
And the second part of that is one of our mutual friends and the guy mix you up with, who was on a podcast with before, Stephen Lopez. We talked to him about Taekwondo when you guys all got started, where you had to knock the guy's head off to get a point, to now where it's just you could graze a face and because of the centuries get a point, and how the sport's changed. It's not as brutal as it was. It's more of a technical type of sport. So how do you said that the senior level, the athletes are all, ready to fire it up. But if they're not fired up at the junior level, by the time they get to the senior level, are they like shell shocked? And how has the sport changed, and how do you navigate that?
It's funny because from an international perspective, and I've made this argument for a few years, I feel like our cadets and our juniors are falling behind a little bit because World Taekwondo likes to do the shtick that all sports are doing now of like, oh, we're trying to make it safer for athletes, fewer concussions, blah, blah, blah. And it's like an admirable goal. But at the end of the day, it is a combat sport. It's kind of like football. Don't get me wrong. The CTE epidemic that's happening needs to be addressed. There have to be better ways to improve things. But it's like, at the end of the day, you're paying somebody to slam into another person like a car wreck every play. And it's like, there's inherent danger in that. And 99% of athletes for that NFL contract are willing to take that risk, long term. But it's like, from a national standpoint, where we are actually being proactive about, like some of the younger divisions have junior safety rules where if you hit them in the face and it knocks their head back, like I can't remember, it's either a deduction or a disqualification, but trying to actually protect the brains of these young kids like we should. But it's like, you go to Iran or you go to Korea or you go to any of these Taekwondo powerhouses, and it's like, no, the kids fight just like the seniors. And so we kind of have this weird lag, and it's always existed in some form or another, because in Iran, when you're fighting to feed your family, it's very different than I go to Taekwondo 3 times a week and I like to break boards. And it's like, it's very different. It's a very different ball game, and it always has been. But we're kind of we're behind the 8 ball a little bit in the United States as far as juniors and cadets coming up. And I'm a little there, and in fairness, there will always be those killers that they just naturally get it. They go into seniors, and I can hit as hard as I want to the face. It is what it is. But I'm curious if in 10 or so years we're going to start to see a lag in competitive toughness in the younger Team USA athletes transitioning to seniors, in comparison to Team Korea, where it's, if I don't win this match, they don't pay for college, kind of a thing. And so, it's a weird time. It's a weird time to be in a combat sport in the United States.
Stephen, can you make a comment about mental health in sports and what you're seeing these days?
In regards to anything in particular, or just generally?
Well, the quarantining and the whole, infection thing going on, pandemic, and what's, you got kids coming from all different parts of the United States that have different levels of rules and regulations, and a lot of, mental health being 40% increase in problems. Are you seeing that amongst your athletes, and and a different way to communicate with them?
So the good part is what I tell people, aside from being the strength coach from Team USA, the clients that I work with on the side, I call it, it's obviously the best way to put it is remote coaching. And so a lot of my career, personally, I either didn't have a training partner, I wasn't with a coach, I was in some remote middle of nowhere, didn't have access to a gym. And so what I always like to tell people that I specialize in is working with athletes that don't have necessarily the resources or the opportunities that the elite level athletes have. And so I've always tried to convey, okay, you don't need a $20,000 Smith machine. Like you can do body weight squats and get stronger, and just trying to really convey that you don't have to look outside yourself to get better at the sport or pursue your goals. Like everything you need can be done internally and from a mental perspective. If you check the boxes inside yourself, you can do amazing things in basically any sport with very little money and very little equipment and resources. And so from the mental aspect of it, it's even before COVID, it was always a big deal for me, for my athletes, because frankly, if you don't have somebody that you can regularly hit and stand in front of and be a good training partner, or you have a training partner that just sucks, like, the only people that I have that are training partners are blue belts, like they're all rookies. Okay, the one thing we can control is the mental aspect of it. It's like, the more real you can make it in your mind, the more it'll transfer to the competition. And so when COVID came along and they started shutting things down, I had a couple of my athletes start freaking out, and they were like, oh, but what am I going to do if I don't have so-and-so hold targets? Yeah. Okay. Like, is the goal still to get to the Olympics? Well, yeah. Okay, then let's figure it out. Like, oh, you want to go kick? Guess what? And what I like to tell them is, I'm like, guess what? I spent 3 years leading up to my Olympics. One of my workouts every day I was doing in my garage. It's like, I didn't have anybody to hold for me. And what I like to tell people is, hey, let's calm down. It's not, Rome isn't quite burning yet. But at the end of the day, like, even though the Olympics is a bit of a lottery ticket because you can be the best athlete and still not even get your chance to go qualify, if I can do it, literally anybody can do it. And so, frankly, a majority of my job, even as the strength coach, is less about, okay, how can I get you physically stronger, and more along the lines of, how can I get you to mentally understand that not only have you gotten stronger, but you're a better athlete now. Because it doesn't matter if your squat goes up 300 pounds if you have no faith in yourself. And it's like 99% of my job is getting these kids primed and in the right frame of mind to actually do what they're capable of doing.
All right. On that note, since we primed you up for 40 minutes,
yeah,
I'm gonna ask the fun question.
Sweet.
As a strength coach at an Olympic event, what's your feeling of these transgender, these women, these men going, now I'm a woman and I want to compete in women's sports, but biologically they were born a male?
I didn't know that about you.
Yeah.
Well,
about Doc Terry.
Yeah, the hormones.
Yeah.
I took hormones. That's why I have the beard. That's why I have a higher voice. But how do you handle, asshole? How do you handle these transgender stuff, which is a hot topic right now, and men competing as women in sports? I know the Olympics have kind of banned some of that stuff,
right?
But still, it's happening. How do you handle that?
So, it hasn't happened in Taekwondo yet.
It will.
Yeah, it just will. Inherently, even if it's 20 years from now, like statistically, it will happen in Taekwondo at some point.
Well, I think some of the Grand Prix we've gone to, some of these European countries are already doing it.
Yeah, that's fair. I'll have the same haircut anyway. It's good to go. Yeah. No, but realistically, it's like, if everybody in the division agrees and they're fine with it, like if a girl wants to fight a guy, if a guy wants to fight a girl, if two transgender, whatever the setup is, if everybody agrees to it, then it's, as far as I'm concerned, it's skydiving. Like it's strict liability on risk. If you're okay with it, that's absolutely cool. But I realize, we're kind of living in a world where, because I think in this past Olympics, there was a weightlifter, that a transgender athlete weightlifter that quite a few of the other athletes were like super pissed about. And it's like, it's hard for me to really speak to, because it's not a situation that necessarily directly affects me. My only real concern in particular, because I'll bring it back to combat sports, is, at some point, because I know USADA and WADA really only care as long as your testosterone and estrogen are within a similar or within a certain range of each other. But my big concern is that at the end of the day, okay, I start taking estrogen and I decide to transition. At the end of the day, I've spent 33 years with testosterone pumping through my system. And it's like, it's going to affect muscle tone. It's going to affect bone density, all of these things. And it's like, at some point there has to be the decision of, we regulate everything to the point that, oh, this person has too high of testosterone, they're banned. And it's like, we try to regulate everything to make sure that there's a level playing field in sport. And for the most part, we do a pretty good job of it. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, particularly in a combat sport, it's hard for you to sell me on, oh yes, we should allow people to transition and fight the other gender in particularly a combat sport. Like I said, it's difficult because, it's not something that directly affects me. Realistically, at the end of the day, like I said, if everybody in the division agreed to it, I'd be much more okay with it. It's when the IOC kind of takes, frankly, a shitty approach to it, and they just go, oh yeah, I'm going to look the other, yeah, we're going to let them compete, and I'm going to look the other way, and I'm going to try and not give this person any press. It's like, that's not fixing the problem. And realistically, I've never met I've met a few transgender athletes, but I've never met one of them that's not willing to have the conversation when they're actually genuine about it and not just trying to do it to get some sort of competitive advantage. And it's like, for a marginalized group, I think the most respectful thing that we can do is actually have the conversation, as opposed to sweeping it under the rug like the IOC does. And it's like, that might get my hand slapped for saying, but it's like, at the end of the day, ignoring a problem doesn't make the problem go away. It just makes the problem get worse.
I agree. And I mean, I think it's just really hard, when the rules are constantly changed, to stay up on top of these rules. I mean, it seems like everything changes like yesterday. So, Spence, it's your time is valuable. Well, no, it's not.
Very, very vaguely. It depends who I'm billing.
Yeah. I would say your time is valuable, but I've traveled with you way too much, and I'm not gonna falsify that one.
No worries.
But this was I love this conversation, and you were really an asset to an advocate for these athletes. And, there's always need for something like that. And glad you're part of that, because it's really, I want to see the restoration of sports as a pure entity that was, that had the element of competition, not all the politics stuff that goes on with taking a knee and stomping on the American. You know where I'm going with that, but I appreciate what you said.
No, I appreciate the compliment. And fundamentally, it's like, when you cut out all the politics and all the crap that goes on top of sport, it's like, what I always tell my athletes is like, at the end of the day, it's like, hey, this is supposed to be fun, right? And it's like, so much of the time, like, the pressure they put on themselves, whether through dealing with something outside or just the pressure of, I train so hard, I want to win. And it's like, at the end of the day, whether it's taekwondo, football, or playing chess, it's like, it's supposed to be fun, man. Like, if it's not fun, don't do it, especially a combat sport. It's like, at the end of the day, the risk is so high that if you're not having a blast doing it, like, dude, take up surfing, do something more fun. Like, it's just not worth it.
I like to surf. I don't want to get my head smashed in.
That's great.
Hey, Stephen, we're going to wrap this up. Thank you so much for your time. You've always been a good friend of mine, and I've always appreciated our friendship. And so thank you for doing what you're doing, and keep doing what you're doing, because you're a great asset to Team USA, and I think they're very lucky to have you.
Thanks, pal. I really appreciate all you guys' time and for having me on so soon after Aaron Brockovich. I'm honored.
Well,
You didn't talk nearly as much either. Thank you.
hey,
I'm not nearly as articulate, in fairness. So
no, you're not.
Julia Roberts has not played me in a movie yet, so.
Yeah, she might, though. After this conversation, she might take it.
Yep, for sure.
All right, buddy. Hey, you have a
Great.
fantastic day.
Thanks, Stephen.
Tell Garrett and everybody over there that I said hi. I miss you all, and I hope you continue success, man.
Yeah, thanks, pal. Thanks for having me on.
All right, buddy. Take care.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Kraken Backs podcast. We hope you enjoyed, and make sure you follow our Instagram at the Kraken Backs podcast. Catch new episodes every Monday and Thursday. See you next time.